Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mana on the Rocks. It is I, your host, Joe, the Bald Man. Joining me this week, as always, my wonderful co-host, Atlas.
Hello, everybody.
Yes, this week we're finally getting to do a discussion I wanted to do for a while. We're talking about ban lists. We're not necessarily talking about like what should and shouldn't be banned, although we do get into that a little bit. More so like the philosophy of it, what it means for the format, kind of the wider reaching effects, because it's not just like a selfish thing. Like the ban list affects everybody in the game. And I think that's a very important discussion to have. So why don't you go on down, get a drink with us? Tell me about Sunday. How'd that go?
It was a lot of fun. That was my first online tournament. It was definitely an experience. I wasn't really sure what I was getting into going into it, but everyone was very welcoming, very understanding. It being my first spell table event and all that, so that was pretty cool. Got to play against a lot of interesting decks. I saw.
Yeah, I was reading the chat a little bit for in our server.
Yeah. I saw a lot of Tivit, of course. It's like the meta definition right now is like Tivit and Blue Farm, and then like the occasional Najila and stuff. But yeah, saw a lot of Tivit. Saw a Winota deck, saw a Cannon deck, saw some very cool decks. I got to play against green red Itali, the Primal Conqueror. It's a food chain list, very cool. I watched some gameplay from some of their earlier matches too, and they popped the hell off in one of their games. Very, very cool deck. And then I also got to play against Obeka, Brute Chronologist.
Really?
Yes, they were playing like the whole shebang. It was like the what are they called? Final Fortune effects, like all of those, and like the Isochron Scepter, like Sundial of the Infinite, all of those things. Very cool to watch.
I do like that list a lot, just because you get to run a million time. You just get to run a million time walks.
Yeah, it was a very unique, exciting deck to watch. So I got to play against them as well. Communication was pretty good. I was pleasantly surprised. I was expecting it to be a lot worse than it actually was. I think just because of the online factor. But it was an invitational, so because all of the players were like invited to be there, they tended to be pretty good about it, communicating, talk through things well. Trying to think, there were only like one or two moments where I was like, I think this would have played out differently if it was in person, just because the level of communication, just like that extra little bit of like tone of voice and like being able to indicate
like body
things,
language and facial stuff.
yeah, all of that kind of stuff. There were only like one or two points where I was like, man, this would be really different in person. So it was pretty good. Will I be playing in more online tournaments in the future? It is possible, but probably not for a while.
I was gonna ask, like, because you're such a person reader, like taking that away feels like a lot.
Very hard. It was very hard when I can't look at my opponents and just assess their body language and be like, no, they have it. So yeah, it was very different. It was a good exercise for me as a player. It was a good experience for me as a person. But I'm gonna be happy to go back to in-person tournaments starting this next week.
That's fair. Yeah, I don't think I could do an online tournament, honestly. I think I try it, but I'm not like chomping at the bit for it. I don't know. I like being around people and playing the game physically.
And that is
way too much.
Yeah, that's like half of the reason that I play Magic is because I enjoy the people. I enjoy the social element. I've said it before, say it again. Like politics, social communication is like probably 60% of my gameplay. So losing any aspect of that does hurt like exponentially. But yeah, it was good. It was good. I went into it expecting to do not great, and I ended up going 2-2, so 50% win rate's pretty good, and somehow managed to squeak into the top 4. It was very fun.
Nice. How did top 4 go?
It was a fantastic match. With it was me, a Tivit player, a Sisay player, and 5-color Sisay. And then Dihada, the Mardu Planeswalker, which, wow, that deck is insane. I think they presented there was a point in the game where they presented 6 wins across 3 turns.
Jesus.
Yeah, just
that's 2 wins. That's 2 attempts a turn.
At least that's what it felt like. I could be overstating, but it was kind of crazy. And it was A lot. It was a phenomenal match. The communication was fantastic. There were a lot of ups and downs, and twists and turns. Yeah, super super cool.
That's pretty cool. We're not personally tracking a lot of the online stuff. We're just mainly just doing like local stuff.
Yeah, at least for, I mean, I track like online metas a little bit. Be like, oh, so and so won Mox Masters. Oh, such and such won a this, one of that, won a Chaos Tournament.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's worth keeping note of, just because there's a lot of different Magic players out there with a lot of different decks and styles. So and a lot of things to take away. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on like what's hot, what's doing really well. Like a good example is like Kinnan, apparently super popular, not here. Super popular.
Well, it's super popular just to one person here.
True. But like it's like apparently if you leave our little area, Kinnan gets a lot more prevalent. And so I think
I can see why. It's a good card.
It's a very good deck. It's a very good deck. So I think that, but I think it's really interesting how that shifts. You can like see that. I'm gonna be very excited. I'm planning at this point to go. So this invitational event was a qualifier for the Surfside Showdown that Eminence is putting on in San Diego, California. So at this point, I am trying to get my ducks in a row to go, and I'm planning to go and attend that this August. So just about a month here. So if all works out, I'll get to see an entirely different meta, and that will be a very exciting way to put my skills and my deck to the test in a way that they have not been stressed before.
I feel like the online tournaments are also a really good way to like sort of gauge like blind metas. Like metas are going to be regional to some extent. Like we're very stacksy up in our part of the world, but I think blind tournaments, like you because it's online, you're going to see everything basically.
Yeah, and that's totally possible. I think there's a very widespread in general. But yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting going down, seeing an entirely different part of the world, playing CDH.
Yeah. So speaking of metas and health and like diversity and whatnot, kind of the main crux for today is I wanted to talk ban lists. Not necessarily like what should or what like shouldn't come off, but more so I guess the philosophy behind it and like what that signals to the larger player base. Because for the most part, I think bans are incredibly interesting, but primarily detrimental, because no one wants their deck to get banned. No one wants a critical part of their deck to be banned, because that means we can't play with our cool cards anymore. Like plain and simple, we all like playing with our cool cards. But what really is spurred me on to really want to talk about this is I've been hearing like some sarcastic and non-sarcastic chatter about like, oh, banning Bowmasters. Bowmasters is too powerful for Commander. And because it's close enough to Hull Breacher, and like I think that's a very funny statement.
What do you mean? You think it's a funny statement?
I think it's a funny statement because if the rules committee is deciding to ban Hull Breacher, it is specifically because of like outcry and like people just bemoaning it. And to that, I have to say, how is that different from like 50 other cards that are exist and played? I feel like if there is like if there's a line for cards that should be banned, Bowmasters isn't even on the list. It's not like it's a good card. It's a punishing card, but it's not like crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Bowmasters is one of those cards that has a lot of strength in certain situations. And I think it's like a really feels bad moment if you're playing like high power. So then you're like, I'm gonna cast this, I don't know, 7 mana spell that does a wheel effect, and your opponent flashes out their Bowmaster in response, and suddenly your board gets deleted. That is for sure a feels bad moment. I can see why it would make some people upset, but so we talk about the game from more of a competitive perspective, it's definitely not a problem because it does provide that punishing effect for what is effectively the meta right now. Drawing cards to out yourself to whatever. I think, honestly, the most punishing part about that card, like the damage is great, don't get me wrong, and like that's basically the reason that people are playing it. Me personally, I think the part of that card that went just a little too far is the amass. Like, as someone who plays
Yeah,
Bowmasters, the number
yeah.
of times that I've just seen that card stick on turn like 3 or whatever, and by the end of the game, somebody's swinging for 20 every turn because there's an orc token that didn't get dealt with, or worse yet, it did get dealt with, but then they amassed again, and now it's back. So I don't know. I think that is the part
Yeah,
of the card that went just a little too far, if it went too far.
definitely. I feel like sticking a master, like anything apart from just like the pinging effect, is just like, oh, so we need to go sicko mode with this card then, because like you said, like the amount of times that I stick a bowmaster or I see a bowmaster get stuck, if the bowmaster is not dealt with immediately, which at this point it's nearly an on-site target for me, if depending on if I have my own bowmasters. But even then, like me and you have gotten several games where we just go, we don't need to shoot each other, right? And we said, yes, we could just start deleting things.
Just delete the
Just
things. Just
yeah, just delete
delete
the
the
things.
things.
Don't yeah, just not worry about like all our giant tokens or whatever. But man, that a token gets very big, very fast. Like, and that's the thing that really got me as soon as I started playing with the card. Is I read the card, I'm like, okay, yeah, this seems pretty good. And then I play with it once, I'm like, oh no, this card's insane. Like this card's just
Yeah,
stupid.
I
It's a powerful card. Do not get me wrong.
was speculating on that token from the get go. People were like, the damage is gonna be crazy with my wheel," and I'm over here going, "Man, your S% looking trigger, and I will untap with the 7/7, which will win me the game." Like, that's the scary part about the card, especially in a deck like mine where you're able to just give it trample on command.
Oh yeah, or like any sort of Timna deck, like it's a Timna attacker that will not get blocked.
Yep. Yep.
It will get in there. You will draw a card. You will deal a lot of damage to people. But yeah, so like people talking about like, oh, it's the next Hull Breacher. I'm like, there are two critical things. One, it doesn't deny you the card draw. I think generally speaking, the rules committee doesn't like things that just outright deny people from doing fun stuff. That's why like Iona Shield of Vimiria is on there, and then Arayo. Is that the
Oh,
one?
the flip, the
Yeah, the flip
actual flip,
one.
not the transform, but the
Yeah,
actual flip
yeah.
enchantment. Arayo, the moon, something.
Yeah, like that's why like those cards are on there, because they're just like they're part of like whole like shutout strategies. But the thing with Hull Breacher is not only does it shut you off, shut your opponents off, it also gains you resources. So you're getting monumentally ahead, even if you're not like playing like wheel effects, which is what people were primarily trying to do is just wheel into Hull Breacher. But like even then, I don't know. It feels almost Dockside esque, partially because it's a treasure, but also because it scales with the game.
I think so, and I think that is something that the rules committee has started to recognize as they've begun to incorporate more competitive players into their like points of reference for what deserves to be banned and what doesn't. Is that it is possible to make cards that scale with the game, like Dockside. They said a while ago that Dockside is probably fine for the format for now because it does tend to scale, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're playing a lot of fast mana, you're probably playing at a higher level, so it's okay to have a more punishing card like Dockside Extortionist because there should, in theory, be more counterplay. Otherwise, why are you playing rocks? Just play lands and hit your land drop every turn. It is mechanically, technically better than artifacts. The downside of Hull Breacher, I think, was that it does scale with the games in terms of the fact that you can optimize your strategy around it. I think the problem that still would exist with it if it were to be unbanned for the format right now is that you will run into, assuming you're playing with not the same pod every week, right? Assuming that you play with new people in blind metas or whatever, blind
Not
pods.
your usual play group.
Yeah, you sit down with randoms. You can have a turn 0 conversation or whatever, and there's the whole my next to 7 thing, right? Well, Hull Breacher, maybe there aren't any wheels in your play group, so Hull Breacher's fine because it just turns off like. It makes Niv Mizzet less good. Your friend who plays Niv as a commander, right? Well, maybe if my group's 7 is I own a Wheel of Fortune and I'm playing it, I'm going to cast my Wheel of Fortune, and I, the casual player, go, whoa, this is pretty cool. I'm going to flash this out in response. And now the game is not fun for everybody. And I guess that is something that's just hard to regulate. Bowmasters is just because it locks everyone out of the game at that point. Bowmaster's less so.
Mhm.
Your board gets deleted, and it hurts. Maybe you make some enemies, but everyone has 7 cards if there was a wheel, right? Somebody took 21 damage, or a board took 21 damage, and they have a 21-21, right? But now everyone is like, hey, you're the person who cast the Bowmasters, and we all have 7 new cards. We're going to do stuff and beat you up.
Yeah, congratulations, you're arch enemy
exactly. And so it sort of like corrects itself. Unfortunately, I think Hull Breacher doesn't quite fit that bill. So,
yeah, and that to me is really what like defines that, is like you're not stopping things. You can still do everything. You just have to deal with another thing, which in that aspect, like, there are so many other things that it's like, yeah, this is annoying, but like you're still going to be able to do stuff about it in theory, or like there are ways to play through and around it. I don't think that it's a big deal.
yeah,
I don't know. Like you look at a card like Thoracle or Breach, which are so centralized into the high power like communities.
Yeah.
And like there's arguments for and against them, but at the end of the day, like the rules committee is, and to their credit, they have done better at trying to incorporate more varied like opinions and perspectives. And I think that's great. I think that's a fantastic thing to do. Only good things can really come for that, but they are still primarily serving like a casual crowd. I think that's the wall that CDH is going to run into, really.
Yeah, I think Hull Breacher as the prime example for this type of style of discussion is like, that is one of those cards where like in a high level of gameplay, that card is actually realistically probably fine. It is something
it's fair.
It's something that is game ending. It's very powerful, but there is some very simple counterplay to it, and that's just play spot removal or more counter spells that hit creatures, or don't let the wheel resolve.
Stern Scolding now hits
Stern
it.
Scolding now would hit it, yeah. But the point being, just play more responsibly if that is a threat, right? It's basically the same thing as like turn oneing a Naz or whatever. It might be technically easier because you can do it over 2 turns or whatever. You can like end step Breacher on 3 mana into a wheel on 3 mana on your turn. But either way, like it's just something that
land mana creep accomplishes that same pattern.
Yeah, it's just something that highly competitive players should be aware of. Like highly competitive players always need to be keenly aware. Oh, Naz is a possibility here. Oh, Protean Hulk could come down like at any time as soon as that person has like black mana online, because they could also, Protean Hulk could go and step Entomb, main phase, turn 2 reanimate, and then sack it to a Culling Link or something. Like there are multiple ways that you can just lose the game on turn 2 in theory to these turbo types of strategies. It's just things that you need to be aware of, right? Very simple counterplay to a lot of them as long as you're thinking and you build your decks accordingly.
And just being aware of them.
Yeah. And the biggest problem with CDH players and why they always complain about things like Hull Breacher is because they're just greedy and they just want to play what they want to play. They don't want to play responsible Magic. They don't want to play, I'll say it, a lot of players don't want to play high quality Magic. They just want to say, hey, I'm going to resolve my turn to a Nauseam. Don't counterspell it.
Please.
Because I went faster and my draws were more goated, I deserve to win. I disagree with that. It's not the way that I like to play the game. But a lot of CDH players, that is the impression that I get, is that that's what they're looking for, which is fine. But if that's the case, then once again, via that same mentality, Hull Breacher should be fine. It's just, I think realistically, the only reason that it isn't legal is because it does not scale well between high power and competitive. It's just on the wrong side of that line, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, like the closest thing I would say, like in that sort of space, is honestly Opposition Agent. But even then, like again, you get to the CEH level, you get to that really high level, like echelon level of play. Like you see 2 in a black open, you have to know that Opposition Agent is a live threat that you can run into. Same idea with Hull Breacher. Like I think initially I was on, when I was first entering the format, I think I was on board with the Hull Breacher being banned, but now that I've gotten just more seasoned, I think it was a little too hasty, but I also think now I don't necessarily want to see it come off because Bowmasters, I think, accomplishes it better and in a more healthy way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm flip of you. It's like I was really sad when I got banned to begin with because I thought it was fine at a competitive level, but over time, I have come to see that it does not scale well between casual and competitive, and because there is no separate ban list, which is an entirely different discussion,
Yeah.
there is a reason
players, you do not want
to
that.
keep it. There is a key reason to keep it on the ban list now that it's there, especially now that we have Bowmasters, which does accomplish a similar idea of threatening wheels and high density card draw that you'll see in competitive, but probably not so much in high power or casual. And it scales a lot better.
Pure into the Abyss is a kill spell if you play Bowmaster in your deck.
Haven't run into that situation
I
yet.
want to live that dream.
Haven't run into the situation yet, but I think about it every day.
Oh, I yearn for the day. It's like up there with Baleful Mastery or Thoracle for me. Like, it's just, sweet, sweet victory from the clutches that you thought you were safe. No, you are not safe here. I have the perfect outs. No, I agree with that because we have to operate on the same ban list as everybody else. Like, there are like just concessions that need to be made. I think the argument to clamor for like a separate competitive ban list, you don't want that. The way CDH exists now is so freeing and so fun because the ban list is tiny, infinitesimal. It's absurdly small given the card pool that we're allowed to work with, and the cards that we can work with. Holy, we get to play with Black Lotus in our deck. Basically, we get to play with LED. That's insane. That card's absurd. That card's insane.
That's so funny because I'm on the train of like, LED is a great combo card. That card's actually like, realistically, that card's pretty shit tier except for the printing of Underworld Breach.
Correct. I think the context of Breach makes that card absurd.
Everyone's like, LED is gas. Oh my god, no. Underworld Breach is gas. LED is just a really, really great, easy way to abuse that.
Correct, but like, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, let's play banless dominoes. You ban LED. What's the next thing that's going to break?
No.
Breach?
Hear me out.
The next thing that's going to break?
All
Breach?
my homies want Brain Freeze ban. That's the problem card in the combo.
Yeah, no, I think you initially like sold you like build me on that one like pretty early on. I'm like, ever since then I'm like, just it's always been a note I've kept track in my head. It's like, yeah, if Brain Freeze wasn't a card here, you wouldn't be doing this right now. Okay, I think the root of the problem is still probably Breach, but also I think at this point I'm a Breach fan. I love Breach too much. I think it's too emblematic of what the format does. It's the lightning bolt of modern. It's the Tarmogoyf. Well, I guess Tarmogoyf is old hat now ish, but it's the bolt of the format. Like, you have to have a game plan for it. It requires and necessitates a specific level of quality and respect to be played with it, and you will get punished and you will get beat by it pretty often because it's a very good card.
I don't agree with that. I think that it is a very strong card for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of decks would still play it even without Brain Freeze, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that it accomplishes a very unique and powerful effect in a color that needs something of that graveyard recursive variety, especially when it can translate into wins. Because without Underworld Breach, red doesn't get a lot. And like you said earlier, our card pool is so broad and so powerful. I actually don't think Underworld Breach stands out all that much.
Really?
Not really. I think the things that make Underworld Breach problematic is the fact that the decks that there are relatively few deck building restrictions for it. You could effectively include it as a red Yawgmoth's Will, right? And except you can cast the spell multiple times, which is already very strong. That coupled with the fact that it's a permanent, which means that there are ways to save it, to flicker it, to do things like that, makes it really strong. But because it does, especially at a competitive level, it scales very well from casual to competitive, because that's part of the conversation we're having here. It scales very well because at a casual level, it is basically pay red 1, exile 3 cards from my graveyard, recast 1 spell from my graveyard, sacrifice it.
Or like, I've assembled my 5-card combo. Yeah, you got it, buddy.
And so the card itself scales really well. The problem that I see with Underworld Breach is that because it has no deck building restrictions like Ad Nauseam, you aren't required to play very many bad cards in order to make it work. You can actually play an exceptionally good number of cards by playing and just play one or two bad cards in order to turn it into a combo that wins the game. Vis-a-vis like Grinding Station or Brain Freeze or something like that.
Oh yeah, LED Brain Freeze fits that mantra like exactly, right?
But like even those is like Grinding Station has even more counterplay. Like it's an artifact. It has an activated ability. It only puts 3 cards into the graveyard, so you have to go through some extra hoops in order to get anywhere. It's slower and it gets stopped by oof, and like it's another permanent, so it can be blown up and things like that. The problem card as far as Breach goes, to my mind, is Brain Freeze, and always has been, just because Brain Freeze plus LED plus Breach makes the combo so impossible to interact with, especially if you add white for Sevin's Reclamation. You get True Intuition piles into just have your combo off basically, if I get 5 mana and have an Intuition, I'm winning the game. But unlike Ad Nauseam, there's no deck building restrictions. There's no penalty for whiffing on a bad RNG or something like that, because you can just go for it again later. And I think that's why if I personally could see any card in the format ban, as of right now, without being able to think broadly about every single card in the format, my default answer is Brain Freeze. Because if someone goes LED, Crack It, Escape, Brain Freeze, like you don't even get a chance. There's no chance. It's a mana ability. Crack goes to the graveyard, and now they're paying their costs in Brain Freezing. Sure, you can endurance them. That's fine. They're putting another 12 cards into their graveyards. They're gonna have a blue floating, and maybe their LED gets endurance, but that's maybe they hit a Lotus Petal. If Storm's high enough, they might be able to even get it up even higher by casting more instances and things like that. They could hit a tutor for their LED to get there again. The card's just so hard. The combo is just so hard to stop when you're using Brain Freeze, and there is relatively little counterplay, especially when you add white for Sevin's Reclamation, like I say, because that also adds protection in the form of Grand Abolisher, Silence, 3 Fairy, things like that, which makes the combo even more impossible to interact. I do not like Brain Freeze combo.
Clearly you don't. Yeah, and I think over time I've definitely shifted more towards I think Brain Freeze, and I guess to a lesser extent, like okay. Similarly, how do you feel about Consult?
Consult
in terms of like
Consult is the penalty for playing Consult. That is a shit tier card that will
fair.
lose you the game
that's fair. That's
more times than it wins.
Yeah, no, that's a got him. No, that's fair. Yeah, I think I used to be on the fuck Consult plan. Like I still am on fuck Consult. Garbage card. Get out of here. I don't want it in my deck anymore. But it just enables the Thorkel so easily.
Looking back on the tournament from yesterday, there was at least one Desperation Consult play that I know of where, man, I wish this card was any other card, like a tutor, anything, because I have to now cast it, and I'm going to search for something to try and stop this win condition, but I'm also going to exile all my win conditions in the process. So I think the card is really terrible. Tainted Pact is a great card, in contrast. One extra
fantastic
mana,
card.
And some deck building restrictions means that the card is very, very good.
There's no deck building restriction. You just can't play. You just can't play a mono black. But even then, you can play it. There are mono black Tainted Pact mana bases.
Yeah, it's just such a good card. Gives you so much control. It's instant speed demonic tutor as far as I'm concerned.
It pretty much is. Like every time I cast it, I'm just going until I hit the first card that's good.
Yeah, sometimes it's an impulse. Sometimes it's sometimes it's a D-tutor. It just kind of depends. Whereas Consult is going to do nothing unless you have no other options, are fourth in priority, and losing the game if you don't Consult for an option, and then you hope you don't lose anyways, or you're going to cast it into this Thoracle, but it still loses to all of the normal Thoracle counterplay. But on top of that, you can, if there's anything that forces you to draw a card, there's no option to play around that by stopping early, and it dies to Mental Misstep. Yes, it increases consistency. If you're on Thoracle in a dedicated Thoracle deck, should you be running it? Probably. But that doesn't change the fact that the card is garbage.
It is a deceptively low quality card. I mean, because we've been on the all my homies hate console allegations for a while, and just the more and more I play without it and I see it played, I'm just like, yeah, this card exists purely to just win the game, or you lose the game because you couldn't win the game with it. At which point, play literally anything else.
It is a coin flip card, and I personally am not a big fan of coin flip cards.
I like coin flip cards to a degree, but I want to like rig it somehow in my favor, and there's just no way to rig that card in your favor unless you're there's just no way to rig that card in your favor, basically.
Gonna take your London Mulligan, going down to 2 cards in hand, never shuffle your library, and then consult.
Remember when the London Mulligan first came out, and people were like, oh man, Delver's going to go insane in Modern with this card, because you're going to know what's on top if you scry. Now we just have the scry. Or, no, I'm thinking of a different
You're thinking of Vancouver.
It was when they introduced the scry rule.
Vancouver.
That was Vancouver Mulligan. Right. Yeah, when that came out, I was like, man, Modern Delver's going to go crazy. You're going to guaranteed flip it. It's like, yeah? You're flipping it pretty often anyway. Yeah. No, I think I have more of an issue from like a ban perspective with commanders more so than I think any card in the 99. But even then, like the commanders I have issues with, the rules committee will never touch. They'll never touch them. So I don't even think it's like worth to have like the discussion on them. But even still, I think a lot of the cards, I think you've bumped me higher on Brain Freeze now. That there's no card in the 99 that I think is worth banning right now because there is a significant amount of counterplay to it and or it scales. Dockside Thoracle, like if you're playing Thoracle in a casual pod, your pod's gonna hate you anyway. Don't do that.
Well, it's just gonna be really ineffective. Like it's just gonna be a very bad card.
Yeah, or like you're doing like silly jank stuff where you're like making infinite copies of it. In which case, like that's not any better or worse or anything than anything else that casual can produce. Really, as far as I'm concerned, sky's the limit. Like Dockside and stuff, like yeah, that's all fine. Like any stacks card, like I don't think I've seen anyone complain about it. Oh no, that's wrong. Sheldon hates Elishnorn. I forgot.
Oh yeah, it should have been 2 white pips.
It should have been 2. He's not wrong for that. After playing with the card, I agree. 1 white for that card is absurd.
Yeah, he isn't wrong. It should have been 2 white pips, but
it should have been 2 white pips. Yes, no, I agree, but like it should absolutely have been 2 white pips. That was absolute. That must have been a mistake in the file or whatever. Any card in the 99, I don't think needs to be banned. Again, sans Brain Freeze. I think everything is pretty fine as is.
Ad nauseum's come to a place of equilibrium where it's pretty fair at this point. Thoracle has enough counterplay. People are aware of it enough. It's very efficient still, but it's not super duper problematic, all things considered. I don't think there's really anything that I can think of. The format maintains its state of being relatively healthy, except for Brain Freeze, in my opinion.
Yeah, like there's some like bonkers ones I can think of. It's like, we'll ban Grand Abolisher. Whoa, that'd be crazy. That'll never happen.
I don't see any need for Grand Abolisher to get banned, especially since Channel is a relatively prevalent mechanic in a number of colors that provide answers to it at this point. So. Yeah,
no, that was mostly a meme. Yeah, I guess I'll tangent on the commanders. Like I made a note. I'm not the biggest fan of the partner mechanic. I think there's a decent amount of oxygen that's being sucked out of the room. I say as a newly converted Tymna player. Then I don't know. I think back to the reasoning on the Golos ban and that they hit Golos and not any other like good stuff generic 5-color commander. Sorry, Atlas, you're being caught in the crossfire here. If that's the mantra, if that's the path that you want to go on, why are we taking the wrong first step on that journey?
Well, it's like signaling, right?
It's 100%.
They've said that before, and so it's all about hey, we're banning this card, and you should take this as the message that card and that card and that card and that card that also fall into a similar category, you shouldn't play them. Or if you do, play them carefully with a group who understands that that's what the style of gameplay that you're going for, right? I think that the Golos ban I understand the logic behind it once it's explained, but at the same time, that card, while very powerful, was
It's
probably
fine.
fine, honestly. At least from a competitive standpoint. It required 5 pips plus 2 extra mana to activate his ability, and while he did ramp you, like, it was only 1 land it had to enter tapped because of his ability. So
Yeah, it had to enter tapped. Like, where's the restriction on Bowmaster? Am I right? Like, come on. Like, where was the balancing put in for Bowmasters? Where
Golos'
like
sin was
Golos,
that he
like,
was printed
it's fine.
too soon. He power crept the
Yeah,
format too early.
I Yeah, no, I think I think I can absolutely agree with that. His time was too short, but even then, like he existed at the same time as like Najila and Kenrith.
Yeah,
Arguably, Kenrith is the closest thing that slots in over Golos. I think for most like competitive decks or even like high power casual decks, you can slot in the Kenrith and like be mostly there, change your land base a little bit. Najila, I would say, is like the most different, I guess. But even still, you're still running good stuff.
I'm just sad from the days when I used to have 3 5-color CEDH decks, because I played Najila, Kenrith, and Golos at one point, back when they were all legal. Those were the good old days.
Yeah, now you can play Reaper King.
Oh, yes. You wait. My spicy brew incoming. I just need to figure out how to break it.
We were brewing that deck for like a day and a half, and then we dropped it. Like you found some like killer tech for it.
There's interesting stuff. It's never quite good enough, but
someday,
someday they'll print
someday.
something that'll be like, yo, this card's nuts.
Yeah, but also I think it's hard to build any like competitive deck on 5 colored pips.
It's not 5 colored pips. It's 10 colorless pips.
That's true.
Or
Which
generic.
arguably it makes it easier to cast though. It's the
It does.
thing.
Well, no. Hear me out. Jeweled Lotus pays for 3 of the colored pips, or 2 of the colored pips, right? Pays for, you crack it for red, and you pay for the red pip and 2 generic.
Yep.
Jeweled Lotus is crazy.
So because we have to exist with the casual format, I think a lot of the things get credence for a lot of the banned stuff. I don't think a lot of stuff needs to come. There are some. I think there's some housekeeping that can be done on the ban list. I think there's a decent amount of stuff that can just come off.
Biorhythm.
Like your Baron. Biorhythm. What's the other like big mana win con?
Coalition Victory.
Coalition Victory.
Card is like, fair.
What are those cards doing? You have to wait for an upkeep for that to happen. You mean you can't find a Nature's
They're all
Claim
sorcery speed
before?
They cost 8 mana to cast.
Yeah, like what are we talking about?
One of them almost wins the game, and one of them has 10 conditions before it wins you the game.
It's silly. And then there's like the powerhouse stuff, kind of like lower down in the mana curve, like Primetime. I don't care for the Primetime discussion anymore. I'm still gonna meme up Prophet of Krivik should come back, but I don't think that card should ever come back. I fucking hate Seedborn Muse so much. They don't need better Seedborn Muse. They don't need Seedborn Muse 2.
I would probably play it.
Oh no, I'd 100% be jamming. Don't get me wrong. I would be playing that card. I don't want to live in a world where I have to play that card though. Like even then, like the rest of the stuff, like I understand the reasoning for it being there. I don't know. I think despite as much as I want to like complain or like hear complaints, I think the rules committee understands what they need to do a decent amount of time when it comes to the bannings and like and all that stuff. Like I don't think it's in the ban list as being like misused or misunderstood. I think the signaling is weird, but also I think the signaling is weirdly required because of like the rules committee is a separate entity to Wizards of the Coast. They're not owned by them, so like there needs to be some. I feel like that's credence for some level of weirdness.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are some cards on there that are still very, very strong, but given the world we currently live in, would realistically probably scale pretty well between casual and competitive. Funny enough, one of those, I think, is Leovold. I think Leovold could realistically be unbanned because he scales well between casual and competitive. At a casual table, if you sit down with Leovold, people will immediately know what your game plan is, and they're going to say, I do not want to play this game. Either that, or you're going to build it as like Sultai Elf Tribal or something, like something weird and casual, which is fine. That's fine. And then you tell people that, and you're like, I don't play any wheels or whatever. That's fine. In competitive, it represents a quote unquote 1-card win con in the command zone that combos with any wheel effect, of which you have a variety and can get to vis-a-vis your tutoring. I think that is, it's not a Jewel Lotus Commander, so it's not coming out probably any sooner than turn 2. If you like have a piece of fast mana or an elf or something, you could put it out turn 1 if you like really, really blitzed, I guess. But then you're down a bunch of cards because you'll be down like Lotus Petal, Chrome Mox, and a pitch card, and then like a land. So you're down like 4 cards right there just to cast
like
your command.
That is your recoup.
And then yeah, you'll get a card if someone kills it, but also if they kill it, you're kind of in a tough spot.
Very tough, yeah.
I think Leovold could probably be unbanned and be fine in the competitive scene, and I think given how prevalent the Rule 0 discussion has become, I think he scales well, which is what we're looking for.
I definitely agree with that. And like reading the card now, I'm like, yeah, this like reading it in with like 2023 CEDH eyes, I'm like, yeah, this card's like, it's good. Don't get me wrong.
It's very strong stuff.
It's very good. Very, very good. It'll see immediate competitive play as soon as possible. Like, you just slot it in over any Sultai shell and you're already kind of off to the races.
Yes. It would become probably the default Sultai commander.
Yeah, it absolutely takes a spot at the default. Would it take the default slot?
I think it would take the default slot, but I also think that... Okay, I think it would be right on par with Thrasios and Tevish slot as, like, default Sultai commanders, right? Because those are the best Sultai commanders right now is Tevish slot and Thrasios. At least that I can think of.
Sorry, Tassiger enjoyers.
I'm sorry, Tassiger. You're, like, B tier. Almost there. Not quite. Tevish slot and Thrasios just draws a lot of cards and does a lot of great things. Funny enough, Leovold doesn't draw a lot of cards, but it makes sure that your opponents don't draw a lot of cards, which is a very good anti-meta card. And so I think a lot of it would just be like, which is better in my meta, and which playstyle do I want to approach it with? Yeah, I think if they were to do some cleanup on the ban list, Leovold could probably come off it.
And like looking through like Panoptic Mirror, why the fuck is that card banned still?
Yeah, like, there's just a lot of these cards have just gotten so
time stuck with
power crept by things that have been printed later.
Whatever.
And there's just been no maintenance on the ban list. As far as like the last card that came off it was Protean Hall. And I get that it came off and Flash was legal at the same time, and that was a disaster for everybody. But I think that a number of these cards, as long as you like look and assess, say, hey, all right, what is this gonna break if this comes back to the format? What was the most busted thing it did back then? Is there anything that it's gonna do better now? But a lot of them were just too strong when they were printed. But like you said, 2023 Vision, they're just very powerful cards. But
they're good.
Nothing absurd and outside the norm.
Okay, there is a card on the list that I have always never understood why. Why is Raphellos banned? I don't understand that.
Oh, Raphellos. That's the guy that taps for green mana and forest or something, right?
Yeah, double green, taps to add a green for every forest you control.
That does seem pretty strong in casual.
Like, it seems good.
I think
Green would love that.
I think Elf Ball in casual would probably be like absurd just because of the mana advantage it provides. Mono green has all of the creature tutors and stuff. It might even be super duper strong in CEDH, being like a competitive Elf Ball thing. There are enough effects where it's like when you cast this, draw a card. When you attack or creature ETB or whatever, draw a card. And it makes a lot of green mana very fast. But
I think for CEDH, I actually don't think the card can come back because the whole linchpin for mono green is you need the big dork. That is your big dork in the command zone.
Yeah, like it does solve all this stuff.
Okay,
right?
I've talked myself.
But I don't know. It might be able to come back and see play in the competitive scene. I think it would probably be fine, especially in a post Bowmasters world.
Yeah,
but
because what's the set line on this guy?
For casual,
he's a 2/1. He dies to a Bowmaster trigger. Yeah, fuck this guy. Yeah.
But for casual, I do think it's probably still a little too strong. Just because it makes so much mana so rapidly, there's no way most casual decks are going to be able to keep up with that.
No, and I feel like mono green is like it's a casual killer because
you're gonna go turn 1, land Soul Ring, turn 2 cultivate, turn 3 cast this guy, and maybe another cultivate if you somehow have enough mana or like some sort of like rampant growth effect. And then turn 4 you're untapping and you have like 19.
Yeah, no, like it's green's an absurd color in the casual world. Yeah. There's a decent amount of cards I think come off that like just fine. I I would like to see Leovold off. I think that'd be interesting.
I think that'd be a sweet shakeup to the meta.
Definitely.
Adding
Definitely.
a Stax-ish-esque commander to colors other than red and white, I think would be kind of interesting. Would it end up as Stax? No. People would be playing Terminaz and Thoracle and Wheels and stuff.
It's gonna do the soul type thing.
But it would be cool. I think there would be some interesting tech and brews that would come out around it, especially in a Bowmaster's world. Limiting the fact that your opponent's Bowmasters can only or your Bowmasters and your opponent's Bowmasters can only trigger once because of these wheels, but also you have access to like Narset as a redundancy effect. Bowmasters is like a damage payoff. I think wheels would be very interesting. It would also be really interesting to see with everyone playing Bowmasters to see a deck that does try and do a hand strip effect with a lot of wheels try and play itself into a Bowmaster meta. I think that would be a really interesting dynamic. So Rules Committee, if you're listening, think about maybe give us a month. Let's test it, see how it works. Leovold unbanned. Just see how it plays out. See if you like it. If it doesn't matter, then it's fine.
God, I don't think that's ever a good idea of like, hey, we're gonna unban this card for this amount of time, and then it's gonna be rebanned again. Like I don't. I think that's too. It jerks around the player base.
Oh yeah. But also unban it for a month, and then they can reban it if they don't like it.
Okay, no, okay. now you got me. Okay, I need to explain to me in that fashion. Yeah, I think we talked about this a bit in the like health of the format, but like. I truly don't think there's anything outside of Brain Freeze that realistically needs to be banned. But even then, like especially from like the competitive scene, like I didn't know it at the time. I've only heard like hearsay, but it sounded like literally every conversation you had with anyone that played CDH when Flash was legal was like, "Oh man, that's crazy. They should ban that card." Like that was like the first or second sentence that people were saying.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And like that was my understanding is like everyone had to scream to the high heavens to get that card banned. So, but again, also they've changed the rules committee to allow more competitive people, so there's more people with like eyes on the ground kind of deal. So like I imagine the rules committee has the resources to know what is going on and where the lines need to be drawn. But like if we're allowing dockside, I feel like we're not approaching the line at any point really. No, at least for me, that line of like where something does and does need to get banned, like I think you hit the nail on the head with Brain Freeze. The more and more I'm thinking about it, the more and more I'm like, yeah, there's very little counterplay apart from like an already set up rest in peace, which you were never doing that anyway.
Well, I mean, like you can endurance them. It is possible to make it whiff, but it's just hard.
Percentages are so low,
and especially if someone is skilled at playing Breach. The counterplay gets even harder because they can set themselves up in such a way that they'll be ready to react. It's just such a unique combo in that regard. And like, whereas I think basically every other combo in the format just about is assuming that the opponent is Hellbent, or that they don't have a counterspell. One counterspell stops the combo. That is not the case with the Brain Freeze combo. It doesn't really matter where you hit it, unless the opponent has almost 0 cards in their graveyard to begin with. Doesn't really matter where you hit it in the combo. If the Breach sticks, I guess the argument could be made, oh, we'll counterspell the Breach. Well, yeah, okay. But maybe it's not a counterspell.
Everything. Counterspell everything.
Maybe it's not a counterspell. Like, maybe there's an endurance or something. My point being that the same style of removal, same style of interaction that is more on board, that's not on the stack, it's not as effective, anywhere close to as effective against Breach combos with using Brain Freeze as they would be against anything else.
But like even like if you're not like jamming it early, and you have like some errant mana floating around, like you will be able to protect the Breach on the stack and or on the battlefield, because if you go Breach lands, LED is already out, crack the LED for mana to cast Brain Freeze, you can respond with the Storm Trigger on the stack to try and blow up the Breach, but if the yard's already live, like they have access to the graveyard already. And like you said, good Breach players are gonna go for that scenario every time if they can. God help you if there's a Pact Negation in rotation. Holy shit, you're not resolving anything. I agree, but I look at a situation like Breach and Brain Freeze, and I see Enabler and I see Payoff, and there's always give and take, and context has to decide which one of those you have to get rid of. That I think in this case, I don't know.
It's the enabler. It's almost always
It's
the
the
enabler.
Yeah,
It's
it's
almost
almost
always
always
the
the
enabler. The payoffs
Yeah.
are fantastic and they close games, and we do need games to end, so that's great. We just need it to be. We just need to be able to interact with players as they get to whatever their game-ending position is, and the enablers, the broken enablers, are the things that make that impossible. It's almost always the enabler.
Yeah, no, and I generally agree with that philosophy.
Flash.
I think banning the payoff, like, yeah, exactly. Like, Hulk can exist and be fine and have counter. Like, you will still like land a Hulk and then sack it to Phyrexian Tower, and you will not, or Calling the Weak, and you will not have a window of opportunity. But also, the Hulk decks are pretty obviously Hulk decks. Basically, if you're on anything Golgari, they're on Hulk. That like, if you have knowledge, you will be able to fight it to some degree. Knowledge is power. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Enablers is always the thing, unless the payoff is like stupid. But even then, you can hit payoff just the same as you can hit enabler. Enabler just makes it easier for you to deal with the payoff. It helps you with consistency and all that stuff as well. Fuck Brain Freeze. All my homies hate Brain Freeze.
Now you're on my train of thought.
Yeah, no, like I said, like I was definitely like, okay, no, I see the logic there. And just through the course of this conversation, like, yeah, this card's really, really stupid.
Brain Freeze dumb
Storm
card.
is a hell of a mechanic. I understand the Storm scale being called that now. It's a hell of a mechanic. That's nearly my whole spiel about bans and ban lists and all that stuff. I don't know. Being a Yu-Gi-Oh player on this side, the ban list is an ever looming thing, and I think ban list discussion and ban list philosophy is very, very interesting because card games, especially physical card games, have to be on a physically printed medium. There are very few ways to correct those mistakes without like hard errataing the card, which I don't like erratas. I think that's really, really stupid. Just print better cards or just own up to the mistake and ban something. I think ban lists serve as a way is another tweak and balance kind of after the printing has been done.
No, they're releasing their patch for the most recent set. It's the arena patch, the errata.
Yeah, which like digital card games are different. I actually inversely that for digital card games, make use of erratas where you can, but also I like ban lists because I think that invites the boogeyman into it. Like, oh, why is this card ban list? Oh, this is what? Oh, that's so cool. Now I want to play with this ban card because like ban cards are like that is the game designer saying these are some of the most broken shit that we created in the game. Unfortunately, you can't play with it though. So ban lists are my jam. I think they're very interesting. Create a lot of interesting discussion. Cool. All right, Alice, you got anything else you want to add?
Nope, we're chilling.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody coming down to Mana on the Rocks. Hope you're having a good one. We'll catch you next time.